Welcome, everyone. It's good to be back. We've had a brief hiatus. I'm Jeffrey Goodman, Director of Marketing and Development at the YMCA of Northwest Louisiana. And we're here at 318 Latino Studios for Shreveport-Bossier, my city, my community, my home. And can't wait to have today's discussion. Our guest is the one and only Winston Hall. Winston, good to have you.
I'm so glad to be here. This is fun.
Thank you. It will be fun, for sure. All right, well, I'm going to hop in.
Let's do it.
For people that don't know, you're a professional entertainer and tour guide, deeply knowledgeable about the rich and important music history of our area.
I try to be, yes.
And we'll get into all that and many other things today, but let's start here.
All right.
There's an interesting story I've heard about your first gig as a performer. So share some of that if you would.
I'm so glad you asked that. I think sometimes when you see people doing their thing on stage, you kind of forget that everybody has this first time. And I had grown up in the church singing some things here and there. Like I'd been in front of people.
Grown up where?
I grew up in a little town called Gatesville, Texas. Actually, Gatesville.
Okay.
Out on the Edwards Plateau, west of Waco. And my home was actually 22 miles outside of Gatesville. So I grew up in the country. Anyway, my first professional piano gig, and this sounds made up. It sounds made up. It's not made up. Was at a Chinese restaurant in San Angelo, Texas. And people always say, there was a piano in a Chinese restaurant. There was China Garden. And the brief story, which is very funny, is that I was at the dentist. Have you heard this story?
Yeah.
Okay. I was at the dentist, and the dentist was talking about how bad a piano player was at this restaurant. And I was 18, and I knew, just so people know, I do this for a living now, but when I did it the first time, I knew like 9 songs. But I just got this wild notion that if the piano player was being talked about that way, I don't know who you are, sorry, that maybe I could just be a little better than that piano player and maybe get a job. And so I did not know what I was doing, had no real professional experience. I was 18 years old and just walked in the door like this just naive idiot that was like, yeah, sure, you can do this. And it was pretty bad, actually. I did horrible. But I got the first one over with, and that's the life lesson. That's the life lesson.
So what'd you say to the restaurant owner to allow him to...
Well, it was a manager. It was a woman named Linda. Yeah, I just said, I believe I used the word professional, which was not true at all. But I just said, I'm a professional piano player. And what happened was, this was like the middle of the afternoon, and she drugged me over to the piano and immediately had me sit and play. And I've heard all these discussions about being ready for your moment, And I knew, by the way, I told this story in my one-man show. That's why I know it so well. But it was my moment. She said, sit down and play. And I knew like the first 4 bars of the song Moon River. And that was all I knew of the song. And so I played the first 4 bars, and she stopped and she said, "You come back Saturday. You'll be here Saturday night, 6 o'clock or whatever." And it was horrifying because sometimes in life, when you ask for something, you actually get it, which can be even scarier than you were expecting. And so that was my first gig, and I showed up just totally unprepared and dressed all weird because I didn't know how to be a piano entertainer. And just fumbled and bumbled and suffered my way through the first gig. And I played the same 9 songs over and over and over again for 4 hours. But that was just kind of a real watershed moment in my life, was that it taught me, and people will say this, and I say it too, is that most of your successes in life are right on the other side of that thing that you fear the most. And if you can just convince yourself to leap over that fear point, really cool things can unfold. And that's what happened with me, and I'm still doing it 25 years later. So it worked.
I like it.
Yeah.
All right, Winston. Well, you help oversee a fascinating podcast entitled Louisiana Haywire.
Yes.
So tell me about the genesis of the Louisiana Haywire project, just how it started, how it came about, as well as the great national news you guys were recently able to share.
So, well, let me back up a little bit before that.
Please. You call the shots today.
Okay, well, I became an advocate for Shreveport's music history because I'm not from here. I moved here in 2007 on a whim for a movie job. Get over the fear, right? I just showed up in town. I knew 2 people. Pretty quickly discovered the music history here. And I kind of was looking around and I thought, well, I mean, what in the world? Like, this is the most amazing story, and not just the Louisiana Hayride, but so many facets of music history here that influenced the world. So the genesis of the podcast started, 15, 17 years ago. And then Benet Summers and Dan Garner, Benet came to me and said, do you want to do a show where we dive into these things? And Dan and I have been friends. And so it just kind of snowballed. We said yes. And so the idea, much like this, is to sit down and have a long-form discussion about music, but not just the history, present and the future. And so we just finished doing some interviews with Hot Boy Yoshi, DJ, and in the same session we interviewed Brady Blade Sr., Pastor Brady Blade. We've had historians, and even living history. We interviewed Estelle Brown, who lives in Shreveport and was Elvis's backup singer in Las Vegas for whatever that was, 7 or 8 years. So
it's an amazing podcast. I will just throw my 2 cents in for anyone listening today. I highly recommend go check it out. Louisiana Haywire. I haven't listened to every episode yet, but the ones that I've thoroughly, deeply enjoyed, and I think they're very important for our local area to hear, embrace, and learn from. Well,
what's interesting is the narratives. And they all kind of overlap and cross. And what you'll discover if you scratch the surface at all is the music community here. And John Hoffman's a good example. He's famous now with Primus, but he was a working musician here for years. And we interviewed David Deaton the other day, and he was in David Deaton's band. And so you got this idea that these wildly crazy successful bands like Primus are connected to Shreveport and our music scene. And these are people personally. And we've seen people grow and succeed, and we're all we're cheering. When we see one of our own, it's like the little green guys in what was it, Toy Story, getting picked up by the claw. It's like the claw, it shows you. So we're happy for those people. And so those narratives show up in our conversation, and they overlap with the past. So we've interviewed TJ Mandina, who played on the original recording of Susie Q, which is one of the greatest rock and roll songs of all time. He's here in town. So you get the idea of the span of what we're covering is like this influential rock and roll music and the future of music with John Hoffman. It's really exciting to see all those narratives kind of coalesce into one show. And we're still getting our feet under us. It's a learning curve.
Where's the best place for people to find it? And also, I do want you to share kind of the big national news that you guys...
Yeah. So it's on YouTube, Louisiana Haywire, and all the previous episodes are on there. Okay. It also airs on Red River Radio, and that schedule's TBD, depending on when we get the next season out.
So there's a video. You can watch it with video, or you can just listen to it.
It's also available on all of your podcast platforms, but I like seeing it because the people are so fun to talk to, but YouTube is one of the best places. You can click on there, and the national story was I've long advocated, and this is where we're getting into the good stuff. This is the good stuff. That Shreveport's story is profound, and it's incredible. And you're born and raised here, right? And I sensed, and I'm not saying anything that's not true here, I sensed a self-esteem issue when I moved here as an outsider. I thought Shreveport needed a little boost in the self-esteem department. And so we advocated for telling this story with the idea that there's national interest. And so Kermit Poling at Red River Radio submitted our first few episodes to the Public Radio Exchange, which is just a nationwide platform where they can download shows from other places, and it got accepted. And so it kind of affirmed this idea that Shreveport and Bossier City's musical story is worth hearing everywhere. And that's what I preach. I'm a broken record. Lord, I'm a broken record. But people know I say this. that okay, where's my camera? You cannot tell the story of America's music history without talking about Shreveport. You can't. And so that's the whole thing. And so when we get on that podcast, we just preach it, and I preach it, and all over social media, I preach it. People are sick of me talking about it, but I'm not going to stop talking about it because it's important.
Don't.
It's really important.
I agree.
Yeah.
Congrats. So
Thank you.
You were recently appointed to the Louisiana Music Commission.
Yeah.
Talk to us about what is this commission and how could this potentially be important for our area?
Okay. Well, I know this lady that you might know. Same last name as you. And she was one of the first people I met with, your mom, years ago. I sat down because I had this idea, and I'll get to the commission. Hang on. Stick with me. I had this idea that I wanted to create a movement around. Now, I'm not saying people haven't done stuff before. I'm not the first. But I wanted it to stick. I wanted it to really change the culture of the city and the mindset of the city. And somebody told me to talk to your mom, Sylvia Goodman. And we met at Rhino Coffee on Line Avenue. And I believe we were sitting out back under a tree. I'm vaguely remembering this.
I think I was there. Actually,
were you there?
There was the three of us.
You were there. How did I forget that? Were we under a tree?
Yeah, we were outside for sure.
I'm so sorry I forgot.
Rhino
that.
Uptown.
You were there. Yeah. You probably told me to meet with her. But this was like, for what it's worth, this was like 16 years ago. But I remember she said something that stuck with me, and I have not forgotten it. This part I remember. She said, just start talking and don't stop. Do you remember this?
No.
I remember that vividly because
Sounds like her.
For people who don't know, your mom is just one of these people that made everything happen. And I valued her words. And she said, just start talking and don't stop. With the parenthetical idea that you never know who will hear you. And that's exactly what I did. And when I tell you, I've been to, at this point, hundreds of coffee shop meetings. Like I have a coffee budget from just this conversation, the music conversation. I bet I met with 100 people and talked and chatted and had ideas and moved parts around. And I just started making a lot of noise. And I got invited to a travel conference by the Visit Shreveport-Bossier, the tourist bureau. They were presenting at a travel conference in Baton Rouge. And I remember the exact date because it was literally like 2 weeks before COVID. So we're down there advocating for travel right before the whole world quit traveling. But the tourist bureau said, we're going to do this presentation highlighting North Louisiana. So I partnered with Brenda Wimberly, a classic singer, classical, who's been on our Louisiana Haywire podcast. She was just on it. And we'd put together a big show. And the grand finale was this. My wife, Donna, and I rewrote the words to I've Been Everywhere, but we used Louisiana town names. Been to Monroe, New Lenamom, Golden, Simsboro, Winsboro, Mansfield, Glenmore, and off we go. And I was kind of on the fence about whether or not to do it because it could be a train wreck if you mess it up. And it's a big grand piano on stage in this huge room full of like 1,000 people. And guess who's sitting in the front row? Lieutenant Governor Billy Nungesser. So I was looking at him down there, and they said, "Oh, you know, if there's not time, don't do it." And I saw him sitting down in the front row, and I said, "Oh, we're doing it. You know, this is my chance to." But anyway, we did it, and it got a big cheer, big hoorah. And I think maybe that was a moment that kind of been imprinted with him because he was in the front row, connected with all of his people, and just made that connection at the state level. And after some more interactions, finally get notified that they want me to be on the Louisiana Music Commission. So just for anybody listening, like anything that's appears as instantaneous, it's always a daisy chain of lots of connections and conversations. And so the point of the Louisiana Music Commission is this, and it's new, or it's been revamped. I think they used to have it a long time ago, is simply that on a state level, there are dots to be connected. And so my job will be representing Northwest Louisiana. I have to go to Baton Rouge a few times a year to have these conversations. And here's what I liken it to, just so people
understand. And this is underneath Nungesser's office?
Yes.
This is underneath the Lieutenant Governor's office?
Office of, I forget the exact name, Culture and Tourism or something of that nature. And so this is how I liken it. Are you a puzzle guy? You ever do puzzles, like
Period.
jigsaw puzzles?
Every full moon.
My sister's a puzzle person. We do puzzles, yeah. And you'll have a puzzle piece that goes over in this corner, and you have another puzzle piece that you go over in this corner, and you look at them. They're not at all the same. And so you say, well, how do you connect these puzzle pieces? Well, the only way is to get all the puzzle pieces between, right? And then they all work. And so I feel like that's kind of what it is with the music promotion, music history, is you have to connect the pieces, but in the right order, so that people see, the big picture, literally the puzzle, right? You got to see it all. And so that's the essence of the conversation. And a perfect example of that is Doyle Jeter over in Northeast Louisiana. He does amazing work. He does a music trail, and there's a whole music association. Dave Gore, my friend Dave Gore, is a part of that. So I have traveled to Northeast Louisiana to one of their events to meet all of them. So it quite literally looks like a puzzle. We're on the northwest side, they're on the northeast side, and you're like, okay, well, let's connect. So there's a certain synergy that develops when you're not on an island.
So have you been to a music committee?
Not yet. We haven't even had our first
Do you know
meeting.
when your first
I
one
do
is?
not know.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm waiting for that, but I'm excited to do it.
Yeah. You're the perfect person for this.
Thank you. Well, I'm one of these people that, and you can ask my wife, she'll testify to this, I don't do well in the minutia, the details. I like to have people around me that are in the minutia, but I'm really good at seeing the larger picture, and then having the minutia people help me do that, and that's worked well. And so the music vision for the music scene is much like that. It's like let's get all these puzzle pieces, and it's exciting when they come together. And boy, every now and then they come together in a beautiful way, and like with our podcast, and the ripples of that are kind of immeasurable. And that's what makes me happy. That's all I do. And play music.
Yeah, and I mean, you're making a major impact. So, like you probably don't know this, but like you, I share an interest in seeing a museum locally dedicated to the importance of Leadbelly. So,
yes.
I want you now to tell us about Leadbelly and what made him such an important figure in music all across the world.
So, Leadbelly. Ooh, how long do we have? 3 hours? Okay.
Sure.
I will admit to you that when I moved to Shreveport, I was very ignorant of Leadbelly. I might have heard his name here and there. Now, we're talking 17 years ago, and I was young and dumb. But the minute I learned about Leadbelly, I realized, and I say this when I do presentation. I do a lot of presentations around town.
You just did one at the Glen, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I did one at the AARP meeting, and I've done them for Lanyap Historical Society and just all these little. So I'll do some. I've done one presentation about Leadbelly, and when you dig into his story, it's fascinating. First of all, he comes from basically poverty. His family were sharecroppers. He was born out on the Jeter plantation. Finds his way into
Morrisport area.
Morrisport, yeah. Finds his way to the red light district of Shreveport, where he tells these wonderful stories about how he encountered music at the red light district, which most people aren't thinking of music with red light districts, but that was his very formative years. And proceeds to, he went to prison and just really like crazy story. But ultimately his songs influenced the entire fabric of American music. And I'll give you a perfect example is Bob Dylan won a Nobel Prize. And he does this speech to talk about his Nobel Prize. And who does he mention? Hughie Leadbelly, Caddo Parish native.
Ledbetter Heights for
Ledbetter
those
Heights,
of you.
yeah.
Same person.
Yeah. And so when you really dig into Leadbelly, gosh, I could go on about him for hours, but he influenced Lonnie Donegan, a UK singer who influenced the Beatles. And George Harrison literally said, no Leadbelly, no Beatles. So when we preach about Shreveport's music history, and remember that self-esteem issue I talked about? When you can connect Shreveport's music history to the Beatles, and it's not some sort of stretch, like George Harrison literally said that. You go, well, that's actually a big deal. And then on top of that, here comes the Beach Boys. And they do a cover of Leadbelly's Cotton Fields. And the list goes on and on and on. Frank Sinatra, Nirvana, Johnny Cash. I mean, like, come on, man. So what I would like to see with Leadbelly, we have a statue. On
Texas, I think.
on Texas Street. He's pointing, you know.
Yeah.
There have been some Leadbelly-centric events in the past, much before my time. But for some reason, they didn't stick, and I don't know the ins and outs of that. But what I would like to see, I'm big on visuals. And so there's a conversation going on right now with the Caddo commissioners because Leadbelly is buried, guess where? Caddo Parish. He's buried out by the Shiloh Baptist Church.
Been there?
Yeah, and his grave is a mecca. Robert Plant goes there. Like, people who understand and appreciate the history, they go there. And they throw guitar picks on his grave. Well, guess what? There's no sign anywhere on the interstate that says, oh, by the way, right? So I've had conversations with the state of Louisiana. I've had conversations with the Caddo commissioner. And getting one of those little brown signs put up is harder than you would think. But it's time we had one of those signs. And here's why. This is very important. Is people, I feel like, are inherently curious. At least I am when I'm driving down the road. And I see a brown sign pointing towards something, and I don't know what it is. I get somebody in the car or voice say, hey, Google, what is? So your interstates are these incredibly important portals for the music history. 75,000 cars a day could pass a sign that says Leadbelly gravesite. And they say, who is Leadbelly? Somebody in the car, family on a road trip, get the 12-year-old to Google it in the back, and you learn about Leadbelly. And all of a sudden, even if people don't stop in Shreveport, they're still learning about Shreveport. Because the sin we commit now, the biggest sin, is that we allow people to pass through our city without seeing any visuals of our music history, right? So Leadbelly is a big one. Like, let's start with the brown sign, and then moving on beyond that, I've long advocated that Leadbelly should probably have his own museum. And, a lot of moving parts to that. But I would like to see that at some point.
Me too.
Yeah.
All right.
Somebody out there who's going to do it. Is it you? Yeah.
No, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
So I've heard you say that we don't talk about our rich music history enough.
Yeah.
So now I want you to dig deep. But now, in your opinion, why do we struggle as a city at knowing, preserving, and rallying around with pride our city's rich musical past?
Okay. We're going to get off in psychology. This is fun. The first hurdle is that we are in a figurative boxing ring, and almost literal, but in the other corner of the boxing ring is the coolest city on planet Earth, New Orleans. Nobody's arguing that. The problem with growing up in a state where you're the forgotten child and the coolest city on planet Earth is 5.5 hours away. And I'm just telling you honest observations.
Or maybe 4.5.
Yeah, depending on how fast you drive. I drive the speed limit, thank you. The problem is you were raised, and it's entirely subconscious. You grow up here, but if you want to have fun or do something cool, you go to New Orleans. This is how pervasive it is. I gave a talk one time, and I won't name who it was or where, but I said Shreveport and Bossier City, the whole metro area, has to believe profoundly that people would leave New Orleans and come to Shreveport for a vacation. I said that out loud to a group I was talking to years ago, and it elicited a big laughter, as if I was a comedian telling jokes. And I almost got a little perturbed with the group, and I kind of scolded them. I said, well, listen, until that mindset changes, Shreveport will always be having problems.
You don't have to name the group, but out of curiosity, were they our age? Were they younger, older?
They were a little bit older. And I talked through it, and I said, here's the thing. Pipelines can go two different directions. And for the entirety of Shreveport's existence, the tourism pipeline has only flowed one direction. And so tourism equals dollars. We all know that. So
let me interrupt one second.
Yeah.
When you're saying the tourism pipeline only flowed in one direction, you're saying we only encourage people to travel outside of Shreveport-Bossier instead of encouraging people to come to Shreveport-Bossier.
Maybe not explicitly, because we have a tourist bureau that does a wonderful job of explaining to the world why people should come here. I'm talking about specifically people that are raised in this environment where it's subconsciously banged into your head that you go to New Orleans for fun and come back to work and live, which is, that's a little true, of course. New Orleans is a fun place. But part of that conversation has to be that someone who lives in New Orleans could look at Shreveport and say, well, let's go see what's going on in Shreveport. But for the longest time, that's just not part of the psyche of Shreveport. Specifically, people who grew up here, that there are things here worth seeing and doing. And so...
And that we should be wired in such a way that when we're elsewhere, we should want to tell people,
Yeah.
you should come visit us at some point.
Yeah.
And this is why.
Look, I'm baffled, and I don't like to be a negative person, but I'm baffled by people on social media who say, there's nothing to do here. I grew up in a town of about 8,000 people, and for 2 years outside of San Antonio, and I lived in a town of 30 people. So don't tell me there's nothing to do here. I've seen nothing to do, and even in a town with nothing to do, I found things to do. So to look at a metro area of 400,000 people and just blithely say, there's nothing to do here. I'm like, could you say anything more wrong? Like, that's crazy talk. And so, I mean, we have, outside of the music, we have a lot of cool things to do here. But you got to hop on Google. You got to work. You got to look, find these things. There's lists everywhere. But the one part of that puzzle that's really missing that would kind of synergize the whole music effort is a music museum, world-class music museum. And we know things can be built here like that because Scyport exists and other museums exist. Like, there are things here that attract people. The reason I hone in on the music history specifically is the international appeal. Now, people laugh when I say this, but I've seen it firsthand. I have seen it with my own eyeballs. The international interest in our music history is profound. Just a few months ago, we had a tour bus full of 60 Germans. And my friend Helmut from Germany, brings buses here, and they tour the Municipal Auditorium. They love Elvis. And so the international interest, I have seen people literally cry when they get here and they stand on the stage of the Municipal. They grew up on the other side of the planet, never thought they'd be here. And they get here, stand on the stage, and actual tears coming out of their eyes because it's such a resonant moment in their life story. There was a German journalist a while back who was texting his dad in real time in Germany to tell him guess where I'm standing right now. There's such this immense interest in our music history. And the thing is, I think locally people don't quite measure that they are literally traveling halfway around the world to come to Shreveport. Not New Orleans. Because guess what? Elvis didn't perform in the Hayride in New Orleans. He performed on the Louisiana Hayride in Shreveport, by God, Louisiana. And so we have to tap into that. And that's part of my whole push in putting the systems in place to welcome those people and having music museums. And by the way, if people do one thing, they'll do two things. If they do two, they'll do three. So there's no limit to how we can musically honor our story. And people will come. Field of Dreams, if you build it. That will come.
And so I love all that. And so your diagnosis is, which I've never heard before, but it's interesting, is if we didn't have such a cool big brother or other sibling like New Orleans, maybe our self-esteem would be in a better place.
That's my opinion.
It's interesting.
But, and New Orleans is a cool city. You can't argue that. It's a great city, and you can't recreate anything. And that's the other thing is Shreveport will never be New Orleans. So if you establish that right up front, you have to say, well, if we're not New Orleans, what are we? And in that question, what are we? That's where you get into all this amazing stuff.
Love that.
Yeah.
All right. So we haven't talked much about it, but you're one of the area's most knowledgeable historians about municipal.
I said I try to be. I try to be.
You are. So
yeah.
Let's say, this is just fun little scavenger hunt. Let's say in your newly appointed position to the Louisiana Music Commission,
All right.
they tell you that you get one project locally to better tell and preserve our area's rich music history. Ooh. What project would you most want to see happen?
Clearly, and this is something I can't spill the beans too much. There's some big things on the horizon, but we need a music museum, and we're 30 years behind. But the tapestry of our musical story, this is the best part. It covers everybody. Every race, every religion, every class, every genre. Yes. That's the most beautiful part of our musical story. Clearly, Louisiana Haywire is a big part of that, but it's not the only part. Leadbelly, and James Burton, Van Cliburn. It just goes on and on and on. And so when we talk about a music museum, world class, not stuck in a corner somewhere, we have to awe people with our musical story. And there's power in the story. One of my favorite stories, which is actually a horrible story but ends up beautiful, is the Sam Cooke story. You know that story.
I do.
But for people listening who may not know.
Change is going to come.
Yeah. Sam Cooke came to Shreveport in 1963 and got arrested because he tried to check into a Holiday Inn that he wasn't welcomed at. That's like the 10-second version of the story. And kind of raised a ruckus, understandably. And the injustice was that he got arrested. And now, at the time, Sam Cooke was wildly famous. And he goes to jail overnight in Shreveport. And while in jail, starts ruminating on the idea that things won't always be this way. And he ends up, from that, inspired to write A Change Is Going to Come. We know Shreveport was the impetus for that song because his biographer, Sam Cooke's biographer, whose name I'm drawing a blank on, he wrote about it in Sam Cooke's biography. So, horrible story, but ultimately this beautiful thing comes out of it. A Change Is Going to Come becomes the civil rights anthem, and the song still carries power. And so on tours of the Municipal, I'll tell that story because why? The night after he got arrested, Sam Cooke performed at the Shreveport Municipal Auditorium, which is a whole metaphor of it in itself. He was treated horribly, overcame that, walked out on stage and put on a show. Like that's the most professional thing you can do and be, is to walk out after. He could have just left and said, forget y'all, but he went on stage and he put on a show. And so I tell that story at the Municipal, and I did a tour one time for the Millennium Project, Chris Chandler's group, and it was a group of young black students who weren't particularly keen on Hank Williams and maybe kind of knew Elvis. They liked the ghost stories, but I told that Sam Cooke story, and I never know who's listening, right? One of the kids from that group did a project on that story later at school. So that's just one example. So when you talk about a music museum, part of that carved out of that museum will be a corner where we tell the Sam Cooke story. And when you listen to A Change Is Going to Come, I get goosebumps every time I talk about it because it's such a powerful story. But that's an example of the texture of our stories. It's not just, Elvis is a big part, but within that are just so many little stories. So we're going to start a music museum.
And share the Jimi Hendrix one real fast.
Oh yeah, Jimi Hendrix. I should have brought my guitar strap. And by the way, hours and hours of these stories. Like there's not enough time to tell them all. But Jimi Hendrix came to Shreveport in 1968, hot summer of 1968. And a lot of people who are watching or listening to this might have been at that concert. Municipal Auditorium. And everybody took black and white photos. That was about the time, we've seen lots of black and white photos of that concert. Well, there was one guy in the room that night taking color photos. And I met him because on the 50th anniversary, 78, 88, 98, 2008. Yeah, 2018. I'm not good at math. I get a call from this gentleman out of Texas. He said, I really want to come back to the Municipal Auditorium. And I said, okay, why? He said, I was at the Jimi Hendrix concert taking color photos in 1968. I said, all right, well, that's cool, I guess. What's the big deal? Well, the big deal was Kodachrome, color film at that time was, I guess, I don't know if it's experimental, but it was like new, right? Not everybody had Kodachrome. So this dude takes 2 color rolls of Jimi Hendrix performing. And the best part was James, the photographer, lied his way into the building. He said he was with Stars and Stripes newspaper, but he wasn't. He was just a guy with a camera. Well, the guard plops him down right in front of Jimi Hendrix, as close as these studio lights are, taking these pictures. and got all these really great color photos, and then develops one roll back home, and the other roll doesn't develop. It messed up or something. So he's got like 24, whatever a Kodachrome roll was. For you young people, actual rolls of film that had to be developed in a dark room. He looks at the pictures, says, "Hey, these are great," and he puts them away, and he forgets about them for like 40 years. He's cleaning out his garage or barn or wherever he had them, and he found the pictures again all these years later and said, "Oh, those are good." So he put them on eBay. This is the best part. And within a matter of like 24 hours, he's getting phone calls from Jimi Hendrix's legal team that said, "Who the bleep are you, and where the bleep did you get those photos?" And he said, "Oh, I took them in Shreveport, 1968. Well, come to find out, the blue guitar that Jimi Hendrix was playing got stolen like a night or two later. And so there were up to that point, there were no color photos in existence of that guitar until these showed up on eBay. And so he got a big fat check for those photos, sold the rights to the Jimi Hendrix Experience, I think it was called. And they used that photo everywhere. It was on their bus, on their promotional tours. But the coolest part was in the picture, and you can Google Jimi Hendrix Shreveport. If you see a color photo, he's got this guitar strap that's real distinct. And Dunlop Music Accessories decides, I don't know why, to recreate that guitar strap, and they call it the Shreveport strap. And so I have one, and we like to tell that story on stage at the Municipal. But what's fun is if you're on TikTok, every now and then you'll see some folk singer with 600,000 followers. Like this one guy, I forgot his name, but he's like maybe Jesse. He's always singing out in the field somewhere. And there he is, right there, Shreveport strap. And so I always comment, hoping I don't always know if they'll know the name of the strap they're wearing, but yeah, I love to tell that story. And so
it's amazing.
Yeah, so we talk about
I never knew it until I heard you tell it to Susie.
Yeah. So these are the little, going back to Shreveport's self-esteem. I kind of liken it to a parent who compliments their kid on the way out the door. You know, "Oh, you look nice," or "Your hair's, looks sharp," or whatever. These little tiny boosts of confidence you're given by parents or people that love you kind of set the stage for your self-esteem. If your parents tell you your whole life that you're a loser, then you think you're a loser. And so when I find these little victories that celebrate Shreveport's music history, I'm always the first to say, "Hey, look at this. Hey, look at this." I learned just the other day, this was like 3 weeks ago, that one of my favorite hymns that I used to sing growing up, "Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand," that one of the very first versions of that, the sheet music, was made right here in Shreveport. And I learned that from a TikTok video that wasn't even about Shreveport. They just showed a screenshot of the sheet music, and right there, real in the corner, real tiny, it said Shreveport, Louisiana. And I was like, whoa, pause. What? And then off I go in the rabbit hole looking it up. And yeah, a woman named Emma Days, I believe her name was, did one of the very first arrangements of that hymn, which is a classic standard hymn that we all know and sing. And one of the very first iterations of it was right here in Shreveport. There's 100 stories like that. So going back to a music museum, those are the stories you tell. And it's starting way back when with some of the interesting figures, that weren't recorded because they were so long ago. Some of the earliest bands in Shreveport. Robert Trudeau talked about a lot of those guys. Some of the earliest bands, and then you move into Leadbelly and the blues musicians from Blue Goose, and just this incredibly layered, textured story that, like I said, covers every conceivable genre. And especially nowadays, that's so important. We're not excluding anybody. The history covers everybody. And that's why I just feel like when the Music Museum gets off the ground, that it will be a bastion of Shreveport's culture and story, and people will come, and they will come. So there you go. Hope that answered that.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I can't wait. I mean, I agree. I think it's so important, so needed, and count me in. I mean, I'll help how I can.
Well, I'll add something to that. I come from this wonderfully audacious idea that sometimes people don't know what they need until you tell them. sounds arrogant. It sounds a little arrogant, I understand. But some of the greatest things I have experienced in life have been because somebody has suggested it. For example, they'll say, have you heard of this band? No. You need to listen to this band. And you put on the music, and then you fast forward 20 years later, it's one of your favorite bands. So I feel like, and again, these are all opinions, but a world-class music museum that tells our story is something that I think people will go, the first time they walk in, they'll go, ah. And the story I tell, which was really the genesis of this whole thought process, was I went to Avery Island. Have you ever been to Avery Island?
Never been.
Okay.
I want to.
Avery Island, for those who don't know,
Tabasco.
That's the home of Tabasco. And my Aunt Sandy, when I was a kid, carried a bottle of Tabasco around in her purse. And we'd say, why? And she'd say, well, just in case. Because you might eat somewhere that doesn't have Tabasco. And that was one of my funniest childhood memories, was Aunt Sandy with her Tabasco bottle. So Tabasco is just part of your consciousness, right? So then when my sister-in-law and her husband live in Lafayette, and so we're down there a lot, and one day my wife Donna says, we're going to go to Avery Island. I said, what is it? It's the home of Tabasco. And my immediate thought was, why would I go to the home of Tabasco? Like, it's a bottle of hot sauce. What could possibly be interesting there? And we go in, and of course, immediately the grounds are beautiful. Oh, this is beautiful. Oak trees and all this stuff. And then they have, guess what? Ding dong, a little museum that tells the story of the McElhaney family. And they were a very interesting family. And they were like Arctic explorers. And here I am, just immediately totally absorbed in the story of Tabasco. And we do the museum. And then they tell the story of how during the Civil War they found this salt dome because they needed salt. And all of a sudden, all the aspects of this Tabasco story, it just becomes this incredible experience. And then they say, oh, wait, that's not all. Let's show you where we make the Tabasco. And so you go in there, and there's these barrels of Tabasco that have been, fermenting, festering. I don't know the word. They're cooking. And I swear to you, this is true. They have this little red button, like you're behind a window, and there's this little red button. And it's kind of like the don't push this button syndrome. And they're like, there's the red button. What happens when you push the red button? And you hit it, hand on a Bible. There's a little fan that blows the aroma into the room. You smell Tabasco. So what have we done here? We've touched on the history, and the visuals are beautiful. And then you get the smell. And now this is all over the course of a few hours, right? So the very last thing, of course, is that you sit down to eat at their restaurant, and what do they have on every dadgum table? This little thing full of about 12 different Tabascos. And you pick up the bottle and you put the Tabasco on your food. So now you've seen it, you've learned about it, you've heard the stories, you've smelled it, and then last you taste it. And I left Avery Island that day, and I said, that was profound. Because guess what I did? Every time I see a Tabasco bottle, for the rest of my sentient existence on Earth, I think about that experience. So coming back to Shreveport, the problem we have is people fly in and they leave and they don't hear about the music. People drive through and they don't hear about the music. People spend time with family visiting, they don't hear about the music. So
people meet you traveling somewhere else and they don't hear about the music.
So I think about that little Tabasco bottle. They're this big. But if you can get all that out of one little 6-ounce bottle of Tabasco, what could you get out of somebody being moved to tears by the Sam Cooke story? Or somebody learning about Hank Williams and how he lived in Shreveport for a year, and he said it was the best year of his life. And you hear the songs, and you walk in their footsteps, and you read their stories. The thing about Shreveport's music history, and I always forget this, is they were real people, all of them. And they all had trials and triumphs. If we can connect people who visit Shreveport to not just the music, but the essence of the music and who the musicians were, they will leave Shreveport with a different idea about this city. And that is a seed that once it has germinated will never stop growing. the problem is there's a thing in, and I'm just blabbering on, so bear with me, but there's a thing in marketing, and I don't remember the exact time frame, but you say a word and it's like within 3 nanoseconds, people form an idea. They do it with names, they do it with clothes, they do it with cities. If I say St. Louis, boom, Arch. I say Memphis, Blues, Beale Street, Graceland. Nashville, Ryman Auditorium. New York, Empire State Building. Like this is just a proven marketing technique, and it's a result of repetition. That this stuff is put in your face. Or New Orleans, Mardi Gras, French Quarter. So when you say Shreveport, the problem is the things that tend to come to people's mind now are negative things. Now, this is a dicey thing to discuss because we're not going to pretend that there aren't problems. But I've always advocated that a problem is never solved with a negative attitude, right? A problem has never been solved with negativity. You can address a negative problem with positivity. That's how things get solved. So the problem right now is there are issues with Shreveport. Nobody questions that. The problem is those drive every narrative, every single narrative. I want to go to Shreveport. Why? There's violence. I want to go to Shreveport. Why? The streets have potholes. I'm not saying, like, every city in America has potholes, right? Shreveport has potholes. We know this. I know where my potholes are. I have potholes around my house that I go around. Like, I get this. The problem is the narrative cannot be completely lopsided. So when I say Shreveport, like with Avery Island and Tabasco, I want people's immediate conjured image to be our music history. I have an idea to address part of that, and I'll just delve into it.
Please.
You have to cut me off. I'm gonna talk all day.
I will when it's appropriate.
Okay. When they turn the lights off. Yeah. I'll be sitting here in the dark still talking about Shreveport's music history. There is I'm just gonna throw this out there. I want somebody to hear this. There's an exit off of Interstate 20. And remember what I said about interstates? The portals. There's an exit at Common and Line on the north side of the interstate. And there's a big loop as you're headed westbound. Instead of going on Common, you keep looping down. And the loop actually dead ends into a city street. And there's a roofing company right at the end of that. In the middle of that big loop is this giant grassy area with nothing in it. It's just empty. And the city, somebody mows it. I don't know who mows it. And I don't know who owns it. I think it might be city property. Wasn't clear on that. But one of my visions is that space can be seen clearly east and westbound. And it's right in the heart of our city. And right now it's got grass, which is beautiful. But what we want to put there is the world's tallest guitar, largest guitar. Sounds ridiculous, right? But it's not, because accompanying something like that, we're talking a visual, right? A big visual of a guitar that screams to everybody passing through that this is a music city. It's a music city. Nashville's music city. Okay, whatever. Shreveport, same claim. We are a music city. And so some sort of like ginormous guitar. We're talking 100 feet tall. And then at the bottom, also possibly a small visitor center. Because people can exit. You see the guitar, and they'll clearly, we'll take the exit, get down to the guitar. And then down at the bottom, there's going to be some sort of visitor center. Maybe not something crazy expensive, because I know money's tight. But it could peel people off the interstate and tell our musical story.
But this is not the music museum.
No, this is in conjunction with that. You have to grab people. And Donna, my wife, and I, we travel. We're travelers. And we love it because we get ideas. And everywhere we go, we see Instagrammable things. We just went to Tulsa and saw the gold driller. Have you seen him? He's 72 feet tall. He's an oil well driller. And he's got Tulsa on his belt buckle. And we were there taking pictures with him, and everybody else was there taking pictures with him. And on the surface, you say, well, that's silly. But the point is, Shreveport's narrative is a canvas, and we hold the paintbrush. And right now, nobody's painting. I mean, that's not true. I take that back. Right now, we could be painting our musical painting. And we do that through visuals and through things they hear. And that for me is one where 75,000 cars a day, or whatever the number is, are passing by. And they're going to look at something like that and say, well, what in the world? Why is there a giant guitar in the middle of Shreveport? And of course they're going to pull off. And of course they're going to take pictures. And once they pull off, we're going to tell the story. Now, people will be saying, Winston, that's madness. And I heard somebody say the other day, and I loved this. I don't know who said it. Shout out to who originally said it. That greatness and madness are next door neighbors. And so it sounds crazy, but there's a real world effect to that. Is if they pull off to look at the world's largest guitar, they might be hungry. And if they're hungry, they might look around and say, where's the nearest restaurant? You know, we all grew up fishing, or a lot of us grew up fishing. Like, step number one is to hook them. And so right now, it's just incredibly too easy just to burn it through town and keep going. And so, and of course, I'm partial to the music history. But if you can hook somebody, get them off the interstate to look at the world's largest guitar, see the visitor center right there. At that point, they might say, oh, well, the actual museum, you know, it's 5 blocks over here. Spend the afternoon with us. And of course, they get hungry, and of course, they'll buy stuff. So it's harkening back to this idea that Shreveport's story is ultimately, its musical story is ultimately an economic discussion. And that's a whole nother thing. But you have to snag people. And step one is to believe in your story enough that they will listen. And that's why, and by the way, the backstory is I was only going to be here 6 weeks, and that was 18 years ago. So Shreveport snagged me, and I've made a life here. So I'm always an advocate for that. Now, there's no public funds for the world's largest guitar, but that's one of my visions, is to get together private money, people who share the vision, partner with whoever owns the property, might be the city, and say, hey, let's do this. It's madness, but it's next door neighbor's greatness. And it's not as absurd as it sounds if you really dig into it. So anyway, that was a long story.
No, I love it. And I lied to you. I'm not coming back to you and asking you if there's anything else you want to talk about, because I think we should stop there. I think that's what people need to leave with and sit with and contemplate.
Yeah. Shreveport has, there's greatness. There's greatness in the city. There's greatness in its story, and there's greatness in the people now that are doing incredible things, often unheralded, but I notice, and you notice, and there's a lot of potential for the city to be stand on its own 2 feet. Don't compare yourself to any other city. Shreveport's story is its own, and nobody, I'll end with this, no city in America has a story, I feel, musically, as powerful and as far-reaching as this city's musical story. So I'm not going to stop talking about it. I'm going to go on every podcast. I'll come back to this one too if you want, but it's important to talk about it always.
I agree.
Always.
Well, love that you're doing that. Please don't stop. Yeah. My mom wouldn't be happy. I wouldn't be either. And
start talking and never stop. Yeah.
And
truly.
Thanks so much for making the time to be here.
Man,
Always great to see you.
That was fun. Thank you.
Yeah.